You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello and welcome to today's first edition of Justice is Served in 2016. Welcome back. We have missed you. I know I certainly have.
Yes,
I missed my co-hosts,
course.
Shaka and BJ. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a lot to talk about because we were off for like a week or two, so we've got some things to catch you up on and tell you about some new things that are just happening. My name is Chelsea Galicia. I'm a local LA workers' comp attorney. I am joined here by BJ Abron, who is a recent law school graduate and passed the that's the word I'm looking for.
There you go.
Thank you. Recently admitted to the bar. Congratulations still.
Thank you.
And also Shaka Smith, who has also an attorney who has experience in natural gas, healthcare law, public defender, and is now pursuing acting and fitness modeling. And BJ has experience in BET, legal and business affairs, and a public defender, right?
Right.
All right, and I'm just a workers' comp attorney. Yay. All right, so let's get into the good stuff here. Well, I wish this was good stuff here. This first one, Tamir Rice. He was a 12-year-old boy in Cleveland who was playing with a toy gun in front of a recreation center when cops pulled up and 2 seconds later shot him dead. This was almost a year ago. It was a long time ago,
Right.
and we had just waited and waited and waited to see if there were going to be any charges for either of the officers involved, and we learned over the break that no charges will be forthcoming. How did we get here?
I think it's disturbing, but the grand jury decided not to indict. So,
Right.
Well, the prosecutor made it clear that he did not want to pursue it, and so obviously the prosecutor is very highly influential to the grand jury.
Extremely.
yeah, I believe there was some talk of the grand jury not knowing the prosecutor took that stance. But the prosecutor is so involved in how the grand jury is looking at information. I think that definitely influenced their decision.
I mean, it's primarily, it is the only voice in a grand jury hearing. This is the prosecutor's work.
So now the family is left to try and, seek justice through civil remedies. I think they have a very great case for civil remedies, but people are really pissed that there will be no accountability for criminal charges here. Do you think that the grand jury got it right?
Well, I mean, we're looking at an epidemic here. And so I think when you look at one specific case, that's one thing. But when you talk about the people's, their emotions and how they feel about this, it's really not just this situation. It's a trickle-down effect of a plague of incidents that have happened in our community. And so statistics have clearly shown, and one of the things that I read was that since 2002, Cleveland police officers have killed 10 people. And of those 10 people, of all of those people, all of them were black. Now, 7 of them were unarmed. And so when you look at the Tamir Rice situation, of course, you want to see a prosecution, right? But it's not just that, it's beyond the individual at this point.
So people were banking that justice for Tamir would encompass some kind of justice for the others who have died, who we don't have video of.
People are looking for change.
And I think it's important to note that grand juries are different than trials. You say the word grand jury, it sounds so official that people think, well, everything must have been vetted. But when you look at your rules of evidence, you're not getting a chance to see a lot of the evidence that would come forth in trial. And so, of course, I think here the grand jury got it wrong. Whether the officer should be convicted or not is definitely a question that a jury should see with the full rules of evidence behind them, so they get to look at everything that surrounded the situation.
So to me, the part that was flabbergasting about this is that on the one hand, I understand this kid had a gun. And first of all, the kid, who was 12 years old, was 5'7" and weighed, I can't recall, I'm going to say, estimate like 150 pounds. So he was assumed to be an adult because the dispatcher did not tell the officers that this was a kid, because the person who had called in to alert officers that there was somebody with a gun said, this is probably a kid and it looks like he's playing with a gun.
A toy gun.
He said it might be a toy gun. He wasn't sure, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's vital information that has to be transmitted to the police.
So was the prosecutor correct in saying that this was just a perfect storm of misunderstanding and miscommunication and not
I can't say that
criminal?
It can kind of go either way, honestly. In this particular situation, yes, he had a gun, and when you arrive at a scene and you're a police officer, without that information, you just see a person with a gun, right?
Well, I would understand the fear that somebody would have. However, Ohio is an open carry state. Yeah. So if that was a real gun and he was a real adult, not a child, he would not have been doing anything illegal.
Exactly.
And
he wasn't pointing it at anybody.
I think for me, I got more. I mean, the shooting itself, when I heard the initial circumstances, I actually was. It sounded like, okay, this might be a legit sort of situation. It was the cops changing their stories about Tamir Rice and what they saw and what was at the scene that really changed the game for me. And having them say that he was hanging out with a group of people and that he had ample time to turn around. They told him to put the gun down. And you see the video, and they roll up and they shoot, and it's over.
They shot this kid in 2 seconds, and there was no one around where you could actually claim an imminent threat to anyone else.
And so having the officers conflict themselves is what really gave a big red flag
Right.
to
When
me.
one said, well, he was reaching for waistband to like pull the gun out, but how has that happened in 2 seconds?
And they said repeatedly they asked him to put, to put his hands up to drop the gun, and
but
then he
where
never
was
complied.
the time for that?
Never saw it on the tape. So.
Yeah, so this is really frustrating, and I mean, my heart goes out to Tamir Rice's family, and I think it's cool that I saw some, and I wish I was more versed in this, some athletes who play for Ohio or Cleveland teams were showing their solidarity with the family. I'm sorry to say justice was not served in this case, we don't think. But hopefully civilly there will be something. Let's move on to Bill Cosby, who I was shocked when I found out that he had been arrested for sexual misconduct. This goes back to Andrea Constant, who was a Temple University employee that alleged she had been given some kind of medication and that he raped her.
I believe, I think digitally.
Yes, so she came forward to the police.
And what does digitally actually mean? When you say digitally raped?
Oh,
Fingers.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Glad to clarify that for you.
Yeah.
So she came forward about a year later to police. Police did not do anything with it. But now that the deposition testimony came out where he admitted to giving her something and then engaging in these acts with her, then they looked at it again, and then they had to file charges quickly because the statute of limitations
I think they had 2 weeks or 2 months
was
left or
about
something.
to run out. Yes. So right around Christmas, he was arrested and posted bail. It was like $1 million. He had to post $100,000. What do you think the chances are of a conviction?
Well, I mean, I would say finally, what I kind of said when I read this story. It was like finally an arrest. Finally, we'll at least hear more information, maybe more of his side as well. I think it's a good thing. I think just to continue to, in my personal opinion, I think Bill Cosby caused some harm here. So I'm glad to see some sort of justice happening. But I do want to hear more of it in case there is some sort of explanation that makes all this correct,
Well, what do you think about him and his attorneys coming out and saying this was just politically motivated, that the DA who recently ran in that county used this as their platform? Does that take out the validity of these charges? I don't see how that's like a...
No, the weight of the charges there's so many women.
It's a lot.
It's just a lot. So, yeah.
So, but in this case, he was only charged with
the
one.
Yeah.
So it's, as much as we'd like for this one case to represent all of them, it really doesn't. It just represents the one.
And I think that's at least my concern for Bill Cosby on his side, because you're looking at this one particular charge, and I have a feeling it's going to be as if he's being on trial for for all these
of
women.
them. Well,
So,
that was one of
yeah.
the interesting things that I was reading about. Another legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, wrote an article about that the issue in this case will come down to whether those other women's stories will be allowed in. And in law school, we learn in evidence, character evidence, but also prior bad acts.
Right.
So I guess to explain it very simply, if I, am accusing Shaka of stealing my cell phone, and I go out and I find other people who say Shaka stole their cell phone, is that evidence allowed in? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Now, if I have rounded up other people that had said Shaka stole their lollipop, that may not be allowed in because that's not the same thing as a cell phone.
And I think that's
Right.
a problem for Bill Cosby. Is in that deposition, he essentially admitted that it was a common practice for him to get quaaludes, and he used that with his sexual partners.
And
Right.
that's what the exception is to the character
That
evidence
modus-
rule, and I think they use the same numbers like 404.
Modus
Exactly.
operandi, yeah.
Exactly. And so because he did the same, because they're alleging that he did the same thing on numerous occasions,
Yeah.
it goes to show that this is a part of how he operates.
It's a pattern,
part of how he-
right?
Yes.
So that I think it will be the pivotal issue: is will these other women's stories be allowed in? I think.
But a judge still might throw that out
And
on the
even-
403.
And
just
if they're
because
not, if they're not let in, I have a feeling that jury still, everyone in America knows the story. So can he get
Well,
a
the
fair
court-
trial if it's not let in? That's going to be the tough part.
It will be tough. I think it will be tough, but at the end of the day, the jury will still have to make a decision based upon what they see during the trial, even
yeah.
if you have outside knowledge.
Yeah,
you
but
can't bring
can
that
they?
knowledge.
But can they?
Well,
You know?
they can't talk about it. at
I
least.
have a feeling
Yeah.
that at least 2 or 3 of the other women's stories will be let in. The ones that are very, very similar, perhaps the ones that are closer in time.
I think regardless, so I think he's going to get whatever maximum penalty is available in this case, because I think America's been inundated with this long enough that you can go in there and try to be impartial, but for the last, year, all you've heard about is Bill Cosby has raped these women.
Right.
And so I think that really impacts upon jury. So it's going to be interesting to see how they try to vet the jury in a way that is fair to Bill Cosby, because I do think he does, as every person who's ever on trial, they should get a fair one.
Right.
So.
Right.
I mean, even though somebody has heard about all of this in the news, as long as a potential juror can say, can still be objective and listen to the evidence of both sides, and the things that I've heard will not weigh me, then they can participate in the
Yeah,
jury.
I just think it's so hard. I think that's such
Yeah.
a difficult thing to do.
And then, similarly related to the story, is Camille Cosby trying to fight off her deposition being taken in a specific case where 7 women have brought a case against
Right.
Bill Cosby for this similar kind of sexual misconduct. And she has asserted her spousal privilege. And so as of today, her deposition was scheduled, and then a judge at the last minute granted a stay, so she's not being deposed today. So let's describe first, what is the spousal privilege that she's asserting?
Well, the privilege to not testify against your spouse. So you have a testimonial privilege and you have a communications privilege. And under the testimonial privilege, under any legal proceeding, you don't have to testify against your spouse. And I think they're trying to characterize the deposition as that kind of proceeding that would be of that ilk.
Well, it is. I mean, clearly, and I think it's actually a marital privilege is what they're calling it, what it actually is called. But in this situation, it clearly will prevent her from testifying as to confidential information. And I think the big issue here is whether, and that's what we were talking about earlier, is whether the testimony can be used in any trial. Excuse me, they can be prevented from testifying in any trial, or any deposition, or any type of hearing.
Right, that was the thing
And
that
to
I
my
was not
knowledge-
clear about. That for sure I knew about the protection available to spouses to not testify against the other at trial, but I didn't know if it extended to deposition.
So, as far as I'm concerned, it's just like the Fifth Amendment privilege about self-incrimination. And if you make a statement in a deposition under oath, it can be used against you. Yeah. So of course, in this particular situation, she makes a statement against her husband. It can be used against him in trial. So it should definitely transcend over.
And it's important to note it's a privilege that she enjoys. So he can't keep her from testifying.
But even questions benign like, was he home on this night?
That's a communications. Well, that would fall under communications privilege, and Bill Cosby could say that was confidential in our marriage. She can't testify to that. But under testimonial privilege, if she's enjoying the privilege, she can say, I will testify to nothing against my husband.
So as much as I would love to hear from Camille Cosby, it sounds like we probably won't be.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if she testifies, it will probably be sealed.
Yeah, very much.
So I'm not going to make any bets that we're going to hear anything Camille has to say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that she should be forced to testify, but the judge thought otherwise. And
Well, I
obviously
think
there's a stay right now, but he initially thought otherwise.
I think if they believe that she may have been involved in some of the criminal conduct, that may speak to why they thought she should be able to be deposed.
Oh, irrespective
Wow,
of that,
wouldn't
no.
that be a curveball that Camille was the one supplying the drugs or something crazy like that?
But her testimony still would be privileged in that case, irrespective of that, because you would have it either under marital privilege or you would have it under your own privilege of
But you'd have
Fifth
to,
Amendment.
but you would have to claim that.
Yeah, she would just simply assert it.
All right, so not so much going to happen there, I don't think. But I still do think that Lisa Bloom, attorney for Janice Dickinson, will be successful in getting Bill Cosby to finally sit for his deposition one day, hopefully in 2016.
And if Camille were ever to assert under self-incrimination, that alone would be more damning than the deposition itself, right? Because we'd say, wait a minute, what are you talking about?
I would think so too. All right, this has to be the most annoying story. Well, actually, it has a relatively decent ending so far. So you might remember the affluenza kid, Ethan Couch, was not even 21 years old. I think he was 16 years old when he was drunk, like 3 times the legal limit, and he plowed into and killed 4 people on the side of the road. He was convicted of killing them, but in the sentencing, his parents offered up some big, fancy, expensive psychiatrist or mental health expert that they hired to claim that this kid was so rich and privileged that he was never taught right from wrong. His parents never told him what was right and what was wrong, and so he couldn't be held really accountable. It wasn't fair to him because he just didn't know better. And so the judge bought it and gave him 10 years probation. So apparently a couple of months ago, he was attending a party with alcohol, which is a violation of his probation. And somebody that was at that party took a video of it and posted it to social media and actually tagged the sheriff's department or police department and said, come get him, I got more if you want. And when mother, Fabulous, his mother, Tanya Couch, and he, I guess, learned of this video's existence and that it was going out there, they threw themselves a going away party and became fugitives when they drove to Mexico and stayed in the beach resort town of Puerto Vallarta, I believe. Where he enjoyed nights of strip clubs. I don't even think strip clubs is the correct name because these places made they weren't shy at all about that they offer like sex. Yeah. They give out free condoms and actually on one of the nights he had run up his tab so high he couldn't pay it. He called his mom, who woke up from her sleep to come bail her son out of this like $2,000 bar/hooker tab at this place. And thankfully they were found, and the mother has been extradited back to the U.S. She was in L.A. Yesterday she appeared in a California court to say that she wasn't going to fight extradition, so she's going to be sent back home to Texas, I believe it is. Meanwhile, Ethan Couch still is in Mexico fighting extradition, which that's weird. I wouldn't think that anybody would want to stay in a Mexican jail, but okay. What do we think is going to happen here?
Well, I mean, I think he'll eventually be extradited, and then he'll get. It's unclear to me how many probation violations this constitutes.
Sounds like 42 to me.
Yeah,
I mean,
if it's just the one, he gets 120 days in jail. If it's just one violation, but if there's more than that, he's eligible to get 10 years per life of the lives he took.
This is part of why this is so annoying. So he was convicted in a juvenile court, and so the punishment that he would get for violating his probation and for running away is not nearly as severe as it is if he would be in adult court.
So it'd be 120 days. I know that they were trying to move that to adult court just to get him to serve that in an adult prison. But if a second violation, then you're kind
This
of up
is
for the.
so unbelievably frustrating that he not only violates the probation by being at that party, but then he becomes a fugitive, goes to Mexico,
And he's still partying. Yeah.
parties down there,
That's what money gets you.
and then 120 days. I mean,
And
that's
that-
infuriating.
And I thought affluenza was a ridiculous defense, but seeing how this mom has really enabled her son, you start to think maybe he does suffer from this mental defect.
Well, actually, I think that proves otherwise. If he didn't know right from wrong, he wouldn't have fled. He wouldn't have thought he did anything wrong by drinking,
No, I'm saying
by
or
violating
his
his
mom
probation.
just took him, So it seems like she's.
Oh, so you think that he can assert that my mom kidnapped me to Mexico?
No. I wouldn't say that.
She
as an
advised me.
No, I wouldn't say it as assertion. I'm saying her behavior is indicative to me of the fact that she's been enabling him his entire life, so that he's
Yeah, I get
never
what
had
you're
to
saying.
pay for anything. Like the fact that the probation violation was drinking at a party, and she felt we got to flee to Mexico.
I'm sorry, privilege is not a disease, okay? that just sounds like privilege.
It may be
period.
in this.
This is
this
really,
case.
I mean, I know a lot of people who probably have the same kind of resources that he had.
Yeah.
We still got to figure out right from wrong. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially one like
Because I don't think it was his
drinking
idea.
and killing people.
I don't think it was his idea to flee to Mexico after getting caught drinking. I think that's
Really?
something- I
Think
don't
it
think it
was
was.
his mom.
Yeah.
It might have been.
Yeah.
I mean, I so wish that we could go back in time and the judge says, all right, Ethan Couch doesn't know right from wrong because his parents never taught him. Now his parents are on the hook for the murder.
And-
I'm calling it a murder, but for the killing of four people for like criminally negligent parenting.
And was there any
Am
mandatory?
I too extreme, or is this making sense to anybody else?
Well, I wonder.
No, that makes sense.
Was there any mandatory counseling? I wonder when they did that decision, because obviously
He
if
went to
your
some
parents are responsible.
high.
No, for the parents, because your parents are responsible for
No,
this.
I
then-
don't. I don't think I didn't hear about anything happening to the
Yeah.
parents. But if your child doesn't know right from wrong and kills 4 people in such an egregious way, and the parents are not held to any account, I think that there's some room for legislation
Somebody
here.
needs to be held accountable, that's for sure.
So she would be charged with felony, aiding
No, it said hindering. Yeah, was it hindering?
a felon.
Yeah, hindering.
Yeah. So which she could face, or she is facing 10 years
Yeah.
for that. I guess that would be semi-satisfactory that she finally is getting some consequences for her bad parenting skills. Yeah, what a shame. All right, so let's move on to President Obama's executive orders regarding gun control that he announced yesterday in a tearful press conference. So obviously, guns have been a hot issue. We have been talking about mass shooting after mass shooting, and President Obama just said Congress has not acted at all, and I'm issuing executive orders. So before we get into the orders themselves, there are some people that say, wait a minute, only Congress can create laws. What is the president doing? Is he constitutionally allowed to do this? And short answer on that is a yes. Does anybody else here
No, of
disagree?
course, of course.
He does. And I thought he had a great response, or I don't even think it was a response. Like, he knew, President Obama, that was going to be one of the things that people said about this.
The Second Amendment, he wants to do away with it. He wants to take everyone's guns, but he hasn't espoused that idea at all.
Right. He said 2 things very clearly. He said, I was a constitutional law professor. I know a thing or two about what's constitutional or not. And 2, I am not here to try and take away everybody's guns. Don't let them think that I'm trying to do that. And when we look at the orders themselves, that's not at all what seems to be happening.
And he compared the regulations to kind of the everyday thing where, I protect my cell phone with a fingerprint. Why are we not doing these things with
think that
guns
was
now?
brilliant.
And so I think he's really trying to push forward gun manufacturers and even the gun lobby. And he talked to the NRA directly. He said, you guys should be doing more on this front. It's shameful that,
Right. Why can we find our cell phone from anywhere, but we can't find a stolen gun?
Yeah, and I have more codes and locks on my phone than I do on a gun that I could own potentially.
Right.
so.
He was talking about how, his, a child can't even open an iPad without the right fingerprint or right code. Why can somebody just grab a hold of a gun and use it? There were some more practical things laid out in the orders.
Well, he's trying to close the gun show loophole. So anyone in the business of selling guns has to then register as a gun seller.
Or they will be held
and
criminally-
document. Yeah.
Right, liable.
So I don't see that this changes the Second Amendment at all? Do you
No,
think that this
no.
infringes upon the Second Amendment?
And if I take a side, I would have to take a side with my personal views of towards the NRA, and that's just my views. But what I think Obama is
So
doing
wait,
is
just to be clear, because this is a little like whoa for us here. You actually believe that the NRA has valid points in their opposition to gun legislation?
I think if you uphold the Constitution, you would have to believe that they have some valid points at least. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm a firm believer that in most of these cases, if a guy wants blood, if a guy wants to go out and kill someone and take a life, I'm not talking about litter or commit a traffic infraction. I'm talking about someone has committed in their mind to take a life. They're not going to be stopped by a mere gun law, period. They're going to go to the black market. They're going to go wherever they have to go, and they're going to find that gun and do what they want to do. We're not talking about, like I say, somebody that just wants to litter. Or those type of crimes.
Well, I mean, he said in the press conference, we're not going to be able to stop all of them. But
Right.
even if we could just stop one, if it makes it harder and somebody trips up.
And I think it deters at least one person.
And that's why I like what Obama's doing, because you get a lot of people who take the opposing side of the NRA. They want to do away with guns completely, and he made it a point that that's not what he's doing.
Yeah.
What he's actually doing is things that I completely and wholeheartedly agree with. We need to have locks on guns. That are not just the old locks that we used to have. I own a weapon myself, and the locks that they have on those guns, they're just inadequate. You can easily it should be with a fingerprint. You should be able to find that gun. You want to make sure, because a lot of people, obviously you get a lot of guns that come in this country on the black market through however they get here, but sometimes people steal guns, right? You erase the numbers on the gun, and what happens? Now you can't identify it.
Yep.
And now it's
But
on
if
the
you
black
stole my
market.
cell phone, you couldn't use it. We
Exactly.
could have the same technology on guns.
Exactly.
I think that was his point.
We
so.
can beef up the technology. That's
And I
for sure.
also thought it was interesting that he, in advance of what I'm sure some people were going to say, he does want to put some emphasis and resources towards mental health, which he mentioned. He's like, there's this thing, called the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, that includes mental health as part of every health plan. So it seems pretty well-rounded, and it seems pretty aimed at that well-regulated militia
And more
part
extensive
of the
background
Second
checks too.
Amendment.
And so
Yeah.
I think they beefed up the number of people that they have doing background checks, and they're trying to move towards an automated
Make it more
system.
expeditious.
Yeah.
So this to me is pretty non-controversial.
Yeah, it's just it's such a hot button issue. You hear gun control, and all of a sudden everyone raises the alarms rather than going, maybe we do need some control. What can we do practically to make sure everyone's safe?
And I think it's because of the fear that most people approach is to do away with guns and not do what Obama's actually.
And I think
trying
probably
to
the majority of
implement
people that are fearful of it are people that don't even own guns. But
Alrighty, so now we want to get into some of the new laws that went into effect 1/1/16, and I think it's kind of cool today. Today is 1/6/16, and we're talking about California laws, and I know that there are lots of viewers and listeners that are not in California, but California laws are always interesting to look at because they tend to set the tone or the trend for laws that will be implemented in other states across the country. So let's go through some of them. The first one that's interesting is an extension of the Fourth Amendment, that law enforcement agencies must obtain a search warrant before looking at private emails, text messages, and GPS data stored in smartphones, laptops, and the cloud. Was this a no-brainer?
This is a no-brainer. It should have been this way. When we get this type of technology, we need to have these type of law that follow suit right away.
right, yeah.
So this would probably be very safe to assume that this is going to be the law of the land all across the country pretty soon, if it's not.
I would hope so.
Alrighty, recording piracy and insurance fraud are added to the list of crimes for which an offender's assets can be seized by law enforcement officials. I think if you commit insurance fraud,
Yeah, but piracy. I agree with you on the insurance fraud. I'm not sure about the piracy though.
alrighty. Police officers or family members may seek a restraining order that bars a person deemed dangerous from possessing firearms for 21 days.
I mean, the problem with that initially, and I think maybe we probably need to read a little deeper into it, but initially how it sounds, I can just make an accusation about a family member and they're hindered at that
For
point.
21 days.
Yeah, I mean, what's the ground? What's the basis?
Well, who's deeming them dangerous? But
Right.
I'm gonna think that this was probably in response to maybe trials.
There
I
are
put
a
someone in-
lot
yeah.
of situations where women who are abused by a lover, former lover, get a restraining out or against that person, and that person shows up with a gun anyway and kills them. There are a lot of situations, and I believe that this was aimed to
Well, I think this
combat that.
It's just police officers, right?
Or family
Or
members.
family
Of the
members.
police officers.
It's any.
Right? Of the police officer.
No, it was just a police officer or family members.
Of the police officer.
I don't think so.
But then who would the family members be from?
Of somebody. So if you thought I was dangerous and
Yeah,
I'm
your
your
spouse.
sister, you can go to the police and say my sister is
Okay.
wacko, crazy, and then if I'm deemed dangerous, then my
Right.
gun can be taken away.
I mean, which makes sense because though a lot of times these may be the people who can actually tip us off before someone does something erratic with a weapon, and so it kind of makes sense to that extent. But again, when you're talking about you're keeping them from a right in the Constitution to bear arms for 21 days, I think you got a bigger issue there.
Well, maybe that'll get taken up to Supreme Court. That would be interesting. All right. Prosecutors are allowed to seek forfeiture of the images and storage devices used in revenge porn cases. So that's really interesting that up to this point, you could get prosecuted for it, but they could never get the images back. Now they can.
Yeah.
I like this, even though I'm still not going to be sending out nude pictures. Law enforcement agencies. Oh, that immigration one. I don't think that one's so groundbreaking. Let's skip that one. Law enforcement agencies must by 2018 develop systems that would allow them to collect and report data on the people they stop, including perceived race and ethnicity, the reason for the encounter, and the outcome.
And this to me makes me feel like I'm living in the 1800s. Like, why is this not here already? So we got to wait a couple more years, but it's definitely a good law.
It's definitely something that, again, it should have been implemented. I mean, I did a research. In fact, my first appearance here on this show was based on a paper that I wrote that was called Colorblind Laws. And I did, in the process of doing the research, I was looking for anything that I could find that would show statistics on what police kept, and it was almost impossible to find.
Yeah.
I found one article that was not conducted by the police. It was an outside party who actually did some did some research to generate the data.
I mean, that seems like a small, silly, simple thing, but only when you know exactly where you are right now can you hope for any change, improvement, alteration in the future. So similar to that, police agencies must use detailed annual reports on all cases in which officers use force that results in serious injury or death. Another no-brainer?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Law enforcement department whose officers wear cameras will have to follow rules on storing and using the video so it's not mishandled.
Again, another how is this not part of the protocol already?
Right. I wish it addressed the release of the videos to the public, but the law does not. Collecting DNA samples from suspected criminals, but can't do it from non-serious felonies such as non-violent drug crimes. I think this is just one more way we're trying to combat the mass incarceration.
Right. Completely agree.
You know, I don't see listed here. We had one where
How about the state will increase compensation for innocent people who are wrongly convicted from $100 each day behind bars to $140 to reflect inflation?
Yeah, I don't know where they caught that figure that said your life that I've taken away from you
Is only worth $140 a day.
You want to add 40 to it.
Yeah.
For inflation.
Let's see here. Children and 13 and younger who are witnesses in violent crimes may testify by remote video hookup. That's probably a good idea. Statute of limitations for civil lawsuits by victims of human rights abuses in California is extended from 5 to 10 years. I think this is a part of a trend that is going to extend the statute of limitations in a lot of cases.
In a lot of cases, right, I agree.
All right. Local governments can set up installment plans for people to partially pay parking tickets if they cannot pay their fines all at once.
I think that's a great revenue thing for LA because I think a lot more people pay tickets if they can pay in smaller amounts.
Yeah. And also there was a law that extended that amnesty program that we talked about on this show. Very specific dates, but if you have an unpaid ticket, look into that. Doctors will be allowed to prescribe lethal doses of drugs to terminally ill patients. And I think we covered this before, and the law requires also that the patient be able to administer the drug themselves, like they have to be able to swallow it. So,
And I think, because there were a lot of cases where, someone was terminally ill And essentially, you know, the family and the individual, obviously, if they're conscious at that point, you know, they would spare the pain, you know, spare the suffering, and you know, and allow them to kind of go quickly. And I think that this definitely assists that for sure.
I mean, this is a huge change in position from where we've been on euthanasia.
Did we have a new law regarding police officer shootings and grand jury?
Yeah, so that's
that was
SB.
in the summer.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was over the summer. But I mean, obviously, through the course of 2015, I
Right.
thought it was huge, actually.
Right, so that was a law that said that no longer will we be using grand juries in police shooting cases.
Right.
Okay. And when does
And
that go
the
into effect? Is that now into effect now?
Yes.
I believe so, yes.
And so instead of using grand jury, it goes to the prosecutor. I think the problem with that, though, is that,
The police and the prosecutors are way close.
Yeah.
you know, I mean.
So at
obviously
least
there's
it
some
brings it
type
out of the
bias.
shadows, because that was the problem with grand juries, is that it's all in secret, so none of us got to know what happened. So yeah, I know this raises a different issue, but I don't know, we'll see how this plays out.
I don't think it'll do much, honestly.
And finally, vaccination law eliminates the ability of parents to waive immunization rules for their children based on personal beliefs. This one was a huge, hot topic issue. Man, this one makes the decision of becoming a parenting pretty tough, but
Yeah,
I,
mean,
think it's a
this
big deal
is-
for a lot of people.
This is really a big deal. And I have friends and family members who have children, and don't believe in getting vaccinations for a number of reasons. And I know we talked about before on here, you know, everybody's eyes kind of went up when I talked about Bill Gates' statement on how we're going to reduce populations using vaccinations.
I still don't believe that, but
Well,
that's
I mean,
all right.
this is one of the most powerful men in the world. You don't have to believe it. One of the most powerful men in the world makes a statement like that.
I
We
think
should
I
definitely
think he
listen to
meant
it.
that when you use vaccinations and fewer children die, parents will then have fewer children, and that brings down the population.
You should definitely listen to.
All right, I will. Shaka, what are your thoughts on it?
I think this is insane that you can't exempt your own child from a vaccination. So I guess you have to homeschool, I guess.
No, that's
I mean,
what they're going to result to.
And quite frankly, maybe homeschooling is better with the way our education system is here.
Right, it may not be such a
So,
bad thing.
yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on our first show in 2016. Thank you, BJ and Shaka, for your thoughts and opinions. Reach out to us, let us know what you think. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? And what would you like us to cover? You can reach me at Chelsea Galicia.
BJ at just BJ Abron.
And at Shaka Strong.
See you guys next time. Thanks for joining us.
From producers Maria Menounos, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire BHL crew, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I'm your BHL announcer, Scipio. Instagram me at Planet Scipio. Thank you for tuning in.
Hollywood
Redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.